7% if they're older. The older they are, the higher the percentage, because they say, hey, you're not going to be around very long. Let's give them 7%, because they're only going to live about 10 more years, maybe. And so that gives them more income streams. So these are all concepts that can really help us nonprofits, because that, as we talked about in this 5% video, you know, there's so much change of wealth over the next 10, 20 years, particularly people in my age bracket, particularly because the baby boomers will be, you know, dying off and leaving, hopefully, a good slice of prosperity to share with the nonprofits. We'll take about 2 minutes here and let Pam get set up. He's a member of the Indiana Bar Association, actively involved in the Bloomington community, and is a fellow in the Charitable Estate Planning from the Institute of Charitable Estate Planning. She's got great experiences, does this on a daily basis, so she's up to date with all of the questions and problems that you may face. Just at the plan giving, there's just so much wealth that's coming forward in the next 10 years in particular that can be a benefit to our nonprofits. And folks like Pam and Scott have been great resources for us, and we want to serve as a resource to you. If we can't help you, we know who to call and where to go if you have questions. So that's what we want to emphasize with the Community Foundation, is our willingness to try to help, you know, solve problems and get you the information. But without further ado, Ms. Pam Davidson. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Here we go. Thank you. Oh, geez, thank you. We're going to take this down to a simpler level, which I'm sure you will all be very grateful to know, and to really put in a crystalline fashion, what is your role in the nonprofit world in promoting gift plans? Because I will tell you, when Gene Temple got up this morning and talked about the satisfaction, many of your donors already know all about that. There's actually an endorphin rush from giving. We all know that. All of us who have given know all about that. But donors who want to make planned gifts, I will tell you quite honestly, they've hardly ever thought of including charity in a plan, because they believe, I myself will say, I love my family more than any charity. They think it's a choice, and it is often not a choice. It really jives with what Gene talked about today. What are your values? You know, putting in charity as an heir of your estate means they've risen to a huge level, don't you think? They're all of a sudden at the table on the planning side, which they've never done before. So a lot of people have that thirst and that quest. And what we're going to talk about in my short hour is how to seal the deal. What is your role in enticing people to think about this? And what can you suggest to them that's not complex? If you think gift planning says, gee whiz, you have to talk about death, you could not be more wrong. It talks about control, doesn't it, Scott? Control. I'm constantly amazed. In Indiana, I think maybe only 30%, 35% of Hoosiers today die with a will. And look at our state right now, a very conservative state. I often say to audiences, why would you be one of the majority of Hoosiers if you have issues about government overreach? Why would you be the majority of Hoosiers who lets the government write the last document you ever leave? Because if you don't write your will or trust, the government does it for you. It's called intestate succession, and it all follows the blood. And if you've already given all you've wanted to one child during life, and that child has been fully satisfied, and the other two are going to get it, if you don't do a will, they all take equally. You've destroyed your plan. So a lot of people never get it together. And in fact, the majority of people never get it together. And I will tell you, though, that in gift planning, it used to be for a long time, we talked about inclusion in wills or trust. That's a fine idea. You can print that language. Do not say in your newsletter or on your website, please include us in your will or trust. Don't do that. Put the language to include our charity in your will or trust is as follows, right? American Red Cross, if you put American Red Cross and you volunteer to the Bloomington chapter forever, if you put American Red Cross, it goes to the national organization. Never stays in Bloomington. So the language matters. The language to include our charity in your will or trust is as follows. And when Scott was talking about how to include provisions in a will or trust. It can be a specified asset. It can be a percentage. It can be residue. Residue is where the gold is. That's everything that's left that I didn't give to everybody else. Residue. That's also a very good choice. So bequest language, don't just be esoteric, be concrete, because study after study after study have said the vast majority, maybe in the 90% of all people who include charity in their plan never tell the charity. And here's why that's so. They worry they'll have to use it during life and they can't fulfill what they've told you. They don't even care about recognition. So it's really us who talk about that in the nonprofit world. Donors hardly ever talk about that, just very occasionally. So if you're going to do that, put the exact language. What is your role? Let me take a step back before I go into any techniques or ideas. What is your role? To talk to everybody. I think in the Hoosier State, it is impossible to tell someone's net worth by how they live in the Hoosier State. So never think, oh, gee, they don't have a nice zip code. They don't live in Hyde Park. Forget it. I've worked in Detroit. I've worked all over. And people have told me in Detroit, they've driven to very scary areas of Detroit to rusted out trailer homes to pick up $100,000 in cash that person had in their trailer. So you don't know anything about anyone's economic largesse. So your job is to talk to everybody, because if you do the math, the more people that do something for you, the greater the success will be, right? The level of participation is what you ought to hang your hat on, is that we're going to talk to everybody. And our role, it's going to say this in the materials that you have, the role of us is to say to everybody, Jim Davis, would you consider including a gift in your estate plan if I could show you how? Isn't that great? That means Jim doesn't have to figure it out. I have to suggest some ideas. That is a brilliant way to look at it, because if you just say to somebody, would you consider us? Do you love us that much? The road to hell is paved with good intentions, my mother always said, and that would be all of us. You know, I just never got it done. Even terminally ill people don't get it done. So the likelihood that somebody will do it, and I will tell you this, people don't get their estate planning done for their families. So the chance that they will do it for you at charity is next to nil or none. That is true. That is absolutely true. You are very low on the pattern. But you have to also be a motivator about this, and you have to repeat your ideas. I raised teenagers. Susie raised teenagers. Lots of us raised teenagers. What do we know about teenagers? You have to repeat, because you never know when they're ready to hear your message. Right? So don't say, gee, we talked about that once. That charitable remainder trust that Scott talked about. There was a donor down in Vincennes, Indiana. We talked about a charitable remainder trust for 7 years, all right? And we talked about it in the wrong way then. I would never talk about it now the way I did then, because I thought technical stuff really mattered, but now I know that simpler carries the day. So 7 years, he's going out to his winter place in Green Valley, Arizona. He calls me from Vincennes. We're going to fund one of those trusts now before we go west. And I said, are you talking about the annuity trust or the unit trust? Which I never should have even asked him that. But he said, tell me those again. I'm like, how could he not know? 7 years. So I did the right thing. The relationship. I said, Dr. Welch, it is unethical for me to suggest that you fund an irrevocable arrangement when you still have basic questions. That's the right comment. Ethical. It is because it's irrevocable. If you fund a charitable remainder trust, it's irrevocable. It's not like that percentage designation on a retirement plan. It's irrevocable. So I said, you have questions. You're coming back in the spring. We'll talk about it. Well, I didn't know this. He had a big tax bill. He made an outright gift to the School of Medicine, $40,000 that fall. I don't think that was a bad thing. He comes back the next year, does the trust, and the next year he's driving back out to Green Valley, has a heart attack in Missouri, and dies. Always go to the funeral. That's a big lesson of fundraisers. Always go to the funeral. And the wife, the daughter, and the son, all three sought me out at the funeral and said, Dad was going to fund $1 million trust for IU. We're going to get it done. All three of them. That's never happened to me at a funeral. All three of them. Wow. And it's because it worked for him. He had stock. He wanted to start funding it. He said, this is my opportunity. I'm going to start. I'm going to do something during lifetime. Scott is exactly right. With that $5,430,000, 99